this session we would like to discuss on South-South solidarity, and this of course follows some of the discussions we've had in the last 2 days. What we would like to discuss is, I hope that maybe as a start we could talk about some analysis of some of the main issues, but then I hope that we can focus a bit more on alternative practices.
You should close the door. That means the program it is.
So I hope that maybe we can discuss a bit more about some of the alternatives, either alternative strategies, so that we can further on this.
Close the door, please.
I hope that we could be focusing more on alternative thinking strategies, and also different ways in which we can have certain breakthroughs in the building solidarity, building connections among movements. So I'd like to invite Sabine to start.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you. Well, I'll start in the following way, because we should ask ourselves why not the internationalism, including all peoples and laboring classes from north and south. What is the relationship between South-South solidarity and the challenge at the global level, political and social? Now, to understand that, I think we have to look at the long run history of capitalism. I will only start with the 19th century. The 19th century was a century of the glorious victory of the new center of the global system, capitalist system, which was Europe and North America, United States, and a little later Japan joined. The establishing of a global control of what we call the South today was called rather the East in that time. Asia, Africa, and Latin America. It had started previously, but in the 19th century, particularly in the second half, in a very short time, the control of the global system by the new, which became the triad, Western Europe, say, Western Central Europe, Britain, France, Germany, the big powers, and Japan controlled the world by grand colonial conquer or by submission, like the unequal treaties with China as of the Opium Wars in the middle of the century. Now, that was the victory of capitalism and how the really existing global capitalism took shape. Not capitalism in abstracto, as a system of exploitation of labor by capital, but as a global system was built. It was, at least when close the door, because otherwise it's. Now, that victory, which at the time would look like the end of history also, the West has conquered the world and submitted it, was short-lived, has a short life, half a century, nothing more. Then by the beginning of the 20th century, we how, and which made the history of the 20th century, the main history, how did the 20th century start? 1905 in Russia, a semi-periphery, which was announced in 1917. 1911 in China, which was announcing the series ending by the victory of 1949. 1910 in Mexico, which was announcing a new era for Latin America. And even we may add in smaller, at smaller scale, 1907 in Iran, the first bourgeois revolution, but with an influence of, through the Caucasus, of the Russian Social Democrats, which are communists, which became the communists. 1919 in Egypt, which was the beginning of a long wave which went through from 1920 to 1967 or 70, the death of Nasser, half a century. That is the first wave, we can say, of what we call the South, calling the East, the South, the peripheries, which had been conquered and submitted. Very fast revolt. It started in China very early. China was submitted with the Opium War in 1840, and the Taiping Revolution, I call that not revolt, 1855. 15 years later, starting re-questioning imperialism, questioning imperialist domination. Now, the 20th century was the first wave. What were the major events? And that ended with the reconquest of their independence by the countries which were still submitted to colonial regimes immediately after the Second World War, with the glorious Vietnamese liberation, combining liberation, national liberation from colonialism and socialist revolution, with the Bandung and the wave of reconquering the African people, reconquering their independence and so on. Now, that was the history. And in that long history, what we see is indeed something close to what we call today South-South emerging. It emerged in Baku in 1920, when Soviet Union, the nascent Soviet Union, the Bolsheviks discovered that what they were expecting and hoping for, that the revolution would move from periphery, semi-periphery Russia to the west, to Germany, didn't move to the west, but moved to the east. And Baku was indeed the announcement of that. So we had, that is the real history. Now this first long wave has produced what it has produced. I'm not speaking, I do not use success or failures. It has achieved gigantic change, including internal social change. And I would say, not socialist, but roughly with some degrees of progressive meaning. Countries where you had, like the Democratic Republic of Congo, 2 persons who had gone beyond secondary school, now with millions. Within 30 years, the worst that we can imagine regime of the South, Mobutu, has done thousands better than the long European domination. That is gigantic change. And these are, now, during that period of Bandung, which was the coronation of essentially, of half a century before of struggles, I would say the real coronation, but the biggest was the Chinese Revolution. But crowning the coronation of that was Bandung, the coming together of Asian and African new and very old nations, but having reconquered their independence. And moving towards, with a project, with sovereign projects, of combining modernization with social change, progressive, more radical in the name and under the flag of communism, socialism or under the flag of national progressive systems, like in Egypt, Nasser Egypt, Algeria, Boumediene, etc., etc. Now, that wave, during that wave, what was Bandung? It was an alliance of the states and the people. The states, because at that point in time, the states were coming out, were the result of the national liberation forces, parties, which were what they were. Some, from our point of view, can be considered more progressive, both other very little progressive, but they were indeed the product of national liberation. They had their legitimacy. And their strategy was to create a political alliance, not an economic integration, because at that point in time, nobody had started the least industries. China was without industry. India was with very little industry, almost a little more than China, but not much, etc., etc. So, but a political alliance, which was called non-alignment, which was non-alignment on the globalization of that time. That was the real content, Now, it was able to develop very unequally, thanks to that, and thanks to the fact that the Soviet understood that this front was, they had to support the new independent South against the Western imperialism, and not to support it, including supporting it in making eventual military interventions not easy, as they have appeared later. Now, that was a gigantic political alliance. The people, to various degrees, in spite, these were all class societies with exploitation and so on, but in spite of that, because of the legitimacy of the national liberation and of the governments which came out of it, including those governments which we insulted continuously during the 60s and the 70s in Africa, neo-colonial government. Houphouët-Boigny was legitimate, Ouattara is not. I'm speaking of Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. And therefore it was an alliance, political alliance, not only of the states, but also behind them of the people, represented, or which was legitimate but gradually eroded by the party, usually, the National Liberation Party, which happened to be a communist party in China, in Vietnam, but was not that in other countries. Now, that wave has produced gigantic and progressive changes, but very unequal. In that era, some of the countries, and not by pure chance, those who had the most radical national liberation that is associated with a socialist revolution, or intending to be socialist, moved into industrialization fast. Those who were not, and particularly those who we call neo-colonial states of a good part of Africa, did not move, or moved so little in that. But the whole got out of steam after 20, 30 years of deployment.
Please close the door.
Got out of steam. And when they got out of steam, the conditions and that getting out of steam coincide with the breakdown of the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, 1990. Gave the chance for imperialism to come back with an offensive of re-establishing their domination over the global South in the name of, with the universal values of so-called democracy, etc., mobilized to support what when as perfectly described as financial fascism. That is the domination of the financialized monopoly capital. Now, that offensive was successful from the point of view of capital for a very short period. Say 20 years, the 90s and the first decade of the 21st century. Very short period. Said to be, you know, it was a time of, it is the end of history, it is, capitalism is there, and that capitalism is there forever, and you don't have, there is no alternative, Tina. You have to adjust to it, and if you don't, you are completely marginalized and excluded, etc., etc. And what we see today is that very short period of the success of that offensive has come to an end. And we have the second wave. The second wave of, let us call it, national innovation plus progressive internal social change. And I remain as a communist saying that in the perspective, the long road of socialism. But that is the second wave. Now that second wave, you know, the peripheries, I prefer to call them so rather than the east or the south, because it includes some countries of the geographically the north, but the peripheries have never been homogeneous, same, because their definition is negative. Those countries or areas which have not become centers of the global system. It's a negative definition. Those who have not become. Those who have become centers have built similar societies. You can say highly industrialized with bourgeois democracy, etc., etc. The pattern of the West, including with its semi-caricature of Japan, but still. The peripheries have never been homogeneous. One is said, because I'll come to this point, which is the point for us, and today, when it is said today, the South is so diverse, look at global, big, industrialized and able country like China, and poor Gabon, or poor I don't know what. And I say, look, when the non-aligned were constituted, what was common between China of Mao and Zhou Enlai at that time and the Gabon of Léon? It was as different as today. The difference was there, and yet they're coming together politically, brought results to all of them, including Gabon. Gabon would have never had an oil rent without the non-alignment, without Bandung. It would have remained a colony. The oil rent would have been pumped 100% by French companies. It was pumped 20% by French companies, 80% by Gabon. What Gabon did with it, the fortune of Léon and then after Omar Bongo, is something else. But even that. So that means that the coming together had produced positive effects which were used or misused, but that reflects the internal social and political relations to the benefit of all. And this is why all African countries, including the worst neo-colonial countries, belong to Bandung and to the non-aligned movement. With China, with India, with Indonesia of Sukarno, with Egypt of Nasser at that time, with Algeria of Boumediene, and so on.
Tito.
Yugoslavia.
Plus Yugoslavia, plus later with the revolution in Cuba, but not Latin America at that point in time. Now, there was an attempt through the tricontinental to complete the Afro-Asian plus Cuba. We used to call it Afro-Asian plus Cuba, not plus Latin America, and into a tricontinental. But that's another series of topics. Now, the situation, the same challenge, how to come together, but in different conditions. That is, in a world where a good part of that South, global South, has moved successfully or less successfully or unsuccessfully into industrialization. Now, if we look at the achievements in those terms, we have at one extreme the so-called emerging countries, those who have moved into industrialization and who are able to compete at global level on international markets, for the export of manufactures, not of raw materials only, because this is the previous pattern of imperialist division of labor, but on manufacturing. Some of them, and these are not homogeneous group. Well, it's not the matter. That was discussed this morning in the panel on China, with the Chinese pattern on one hand, with what I call emerging China. Emerging plus lumpen development, India. That is emerging, but simultaneously deepening pauperization for the majority of the rural poor, Same with respect to different way Mexico or Brazil. All that a different picture. And those who have not moved into industrialization at all, or very little, and very weakly. Grosso modo, the whole continent of Africa, maybe we can question it except South Africa, but including Egypt and Algeria, which are the only one in the north which moved a little, or started to move into industrialization. A good part is areas and countries in South and Central America, the Andean country in particular, Bolivia, Paraguay, Peru, a good part of Central America. One may say areas in a country like Brazil, like just India, we have to speak also of geographical areas, and a good part of, and countries in Asia. Now, why and how to bring together, and whom we bring together. Now, there is a discourse that says all the governments of all these countries are bad. I'm not far from being convinced that this is correct, including those who are a little less bad than others. But all are bad. All are supporting the exploiting local classes against their own working classes. Not only industrial working classes, but exploiting and super exploiting their own peasants. And I'm not far from believing that this is not incorrect. Therefore, the only front which can come out is the front of exploited, dominated classes of our countries of the South, against their regime, their government, and behind it against imperialism. I say this is half correct. It's not incorrect, but it is half correct. Because I believe that we are there for a long time still with ruling classes and states. We shall have nowhere beautiful socialism through a beautiful revolution, neither in the north nor in the south, at any place. And therefore, we ought to know that those governments will continue to have states, will continue to have ruling classes, will continue to have states and exploiting ruling classes, but it can change it can change to various degrees, as it has changed in the past to various degrees. That is, as a result of the, let's call it classically, the class struggles, social struggles, it can become a state with another social content than purely the representative of the ruling exploiting classes and as a transmission belt of imperialism. And there are already conflict of interest between some of those states and imperialism, and particularly those who have been successful and who are most emergent. I think one of the characteristics of our time is already the conflict between China and the imperialist triad. And it will be more and more of others. Certainly, but to which extent and where, that is a very open question. Now, therefore, what is to be built? What we ought to build is, I think, now also, because precisely of the achievements of the first wave, we are no more in the position of 1955. In 1955, we used to say, we cannot produce even a bicycle without the Western technology. But now, we can produce missiles without support. Or some countries can, and etc. And we can. So there is a ground, but a ground with its internal contradiction for another pattern of cooperation which involves the states, cannot be done by the people. That is the struggle of the people to change the social content of the state is one hand, or one leg. The other leg is, to the extent that the state changes, it can use the new capacities, economic capacities, to develop another pattern of cooperation. That is the challenge. Now, the danger of that is the challenge. Now, the response to that situation, in a caricature way, I'll take the two extremes, the worst and the beautiful. The worst will be that those who happen to have some capacities think that they can behave with the others as imperialist power and go associating the plunder of the poorest. That might be very attractive to some, not only ruling classes, but also the billionaires associated with them. And that could be the behavior of a Chinese company, the behavior of a Brazilian company, and it is the behavior of a Chinese or a Brazilian company. But fortunately, the political power cannot be reduced in our countries as in the West. What is good for four companies, good for the US state, because the US state is nothing else but the Council of Management of US monopolies. It's not the same. Chinese state, Indian state, Brazilian state cannot be summarized that it is the representative of, even if those social and economic forces are represented through those states. And therefore, that would be failure. Because, it's very attractive. And China is invited, number one, to join in that perspective. Because it's the most powerful, perhaps even the only powerful at economic level. It can provide technologies, it can have access to market, it is competitive, etc., etc. So China welcome in the club of imperialist power, the new, and even there are people who say the rising imperialist power, and Westerners are afraid yellow imperialism will replace white imperialism, and we hate it because it's not white imperialism, because of its color, etc., etc. And some Chinese might be very attracted by that. that it would be an illusion, a terrible illusion, because it would lead not only to breaking the South-South people's solidarity and state solidarity, but it would facilitate the control of imperialism over the whole, including the one which seems successful, China. Why? Because in order to run that financial imperialism, you have to have the military control of the planet. And this is why the US, and behind the US, their lackeys, Europeans and Japanese, are following the military control of the planet. China is aware, including the ruling class of China, they are not stupid people, that they have not. And they cannot have that. And therefore, that they cannot be. Therefore, let us exclude that worst, which could happen. Worst choice. The best one would be that everybody understands that there we have common interests vis-à-vis global imperialism and vis-à-vis this fascist financialized monopoly capital.
That's what you mean.
Yeah. So that we have common interest. And that is the basis, objective basis, for thinking patterns of cooperation which are meaningful, that which are helping not only the stronger, but also the weakest partner in the alliance. Now, in that respect, and I will repeat what I have said somewhere else, but still I think it is part of the for understanding. DAC, the donor collective, the donor club, the club of gangsters, the club of plunderers, the Western powers plus World Bank, IMF, and so on. With respect to one of the big area of the poorest and weakest, the African countries, what is it? It is saying, we provide you aid, so-called aid. I would call it AIDS rather than aid. We provide you aid, but provided that it doesn't go to foolish industrialization, but to you remaining provider of natural resources that we need, not only oil, but minerals, and eventually now land for agro-fuels and for other things, etc., etc. Now, China, but also India, but also Brazil, can offer something else, precisely if we ask for them. Okay, you need, China needs, and when made a beautiful presentation why China, for historical, geographical reasons, is a country with 22% or 20% of human population, but only 7% of the arable lands, and also less than 20% of any, of most of the fundamental natural resources needed. Need natural resources, but China can provide, if we ask for it, in counterpart of that, infrastructure, moving into industrialization, getting technologies without paying royalties to multinationals, etc., etc. So the ball is in our camp. Now, that is the basis. And I think on that, you see, if you want to walk on two legs, one, and there are not one leg more important than the other. One is at national level, the struggle, the social struggle for changing the social content of the state in our country. And the second leg is to the extent that this state is changed more or less, we can build the cooperation between the states, which is an economic cooperation, but this economic cooperation will be also a political one, that is building a political front vis-à-vis the plan of military control of the planet by the imperialist triad. This is how I understand the challenge that we are facing. Thank you.
So the discussion is why South-South and also how. Yes. And so Sami has given us this general framework. Maybe when would you like to?
I have said that Chinese always be a good student. I'm trying to tell you that what I learned from Samuel means speaking. And but I have a very bad habit. I need to draw a kind of structure and then to make you understand what we learned. So here I use it. Sorry, it's a bad habit. You will know that it's a Egyptian pyramid. From
The Chinese pyramid.
The Egyptian pyramid is a stable structure. And nowadays in China, we have two kinds of Egyptian pyramid. This one here is a physical properties. Physical properties at the low level, the total amount of physical properties in China, more than 200 trillion big. And then by the infrastructure construction, the more you build up the way, the pavement road, electricity, and tap water, and so on and so, means that the land will be increased their volume. Understand me? Yeah. So means that by the governments invest into the infrastructure, you can increase your property volume. So the total amount of this property volume, physical properties in China, enlarge because large amount of government invest into the physical production, into the infrastructure construction. And then second level is that based on how much physical properties, you can have how much financial properties. That is economic sovereignty. If you have your own state, your own power, you issue your own money to monetize your properties. So from here, that you have financial properties. Financial properties based on the physical properties. So this one, now China have more than 200 trillion physical properties in large, and then have 150 trillion financial assets. So smaller than the physical assets. So that is a percentage. Financial is not bubble. Financial is that money to monetize your properties. And then here, the top is the government debts. Here is the debts. The debts is very smaller now because you enlarge your physical properties and then you issue your paper money, all enlarge. And then the percentage of the debt here became smaller. So now compare with all the industrial countries, most of these are North countries. China is the country with smallest government's debts, the percentage, not the total amount. Total amount is still be big. That is one thing. So that is an Egyptian pyramid. We learned from Egypt. Second one is also very important. I have no place to draw this picture. Anyway, the structure of society. We don't have extremely poor because by 1949 land revolution, That is in name of communism. All rural people have a piece of land, equal distribute, no pay. It means by you join revolution, you gain a piece of land for the half century. Nobody can change such kind of basic institution in China. So now the lower class in China is a petit bourgeois. All poor people have their own house, their own land. They are poor or not. So when you talk about extremely poor, we said the extremely poor in China means lower class. Lower class means petit bourgeois, means small landholder, small householder. So nowadays, you may know that 90% of Chinese have private house and apartments. 100% of rural people have private house. That is socialism. When people challenge China is socialism, I said, okay, just go to do the research. You may know that there's a few countries like China can free give land. No matter you construct your own house or you plow your agriculture and then you have a peaceful land. That's membership rights. Naturally, you born here in the village. You naturally have a human rights to take a piece of land and then for yourself and your family. So we don't have extremely poor. The low class in China nowadays 60%. They are small property holders. A lot of people, they would like to change their position to be the citizens. So if you change, you give up your land, you take the money. The money need to be equal to 2 flats. You live in 1 flat, you can rent. And then it means that you will still be a kind of petit bourgeois, originally a small farmland owner. Now you change, became a kind of small flat owner, and then you can take lease. That is a low class. And then, based on such kind of low class, by these 30 years so-called industrialization and whatever, we have middle class. Now the middle class total amount is 300 million, bigger than the total population in the United States. So the middle class now became a kind of so-called new class. They have so many new interests. They want to fight for their interests, like 18th century in France. New middle class aroused a lot of struggle, and then to push these small citizens, poor citizens, to join the French Revolution and then change. Okay, so that is a history. But nowadays, the new class in China grow up. That's the middle class. They control, like me. I'm a typical middle class. Professors, okay, control education. Correspondents control media. And then lawyers control the court, whatever. So they are all middle class. So they have a big sum, more than low class. But if you do the survey, you ask these big Chinese people, are you satisfied? So that is a very different answer. So nowadays, most of us overseas, not inside China, we take the information from our new middle class, not from low class. That is the problem. Now, and also the upper one is the so-called high class. But high class is not stable. Because what is high class? They control the state assets. I mean state company. They belong to the state. It's a state capital. Like financial assets in China, 70 or more than 70% controlled by the national bank, not by private bank. And even if the private bank smaller, also joined by national bank. So the financial system totally controlled by the government. Means that governments have 2 pockets. One is budget, another is a bank. So they can use these 2 pockets, not like capitalism. Capitalism, bank is private. Budget is very big debts. So you only can move your debts to the public society. You cannot make this a bank to take any cost. But China can move. I mean, even it's for Western financial capital rule is not good. But for the country, what is a bank? Bank manage the money. Money produced by power, not by gold. By power. So that is in the modern society, there's a different structure. That is a so-called economic structure. We have such kind of pyramid. Social structure, low class, middle class, and high class. But high class cannot be very private. Still be controlled by state. So that is a structure in China. Now, why I said I fully agree with Sami Amin. I learned a lot from his speakings, and then we also have a lot of discussion. Look, that is a new liberalism covenant by Anglo-American model. Here, bubble, mean bubble capital, bubble finance. Yes, they have a QE1 and then QEN. Not United States, but Europe, and now followed by Japan. So one by another, they all enlarge their bubble. But they don't, look, I think that, okay, it's your right. You issue a lot of paper money, many trillions. It's your right. But you cannot just reduce your budget debts. Now the total debts in the United States, I mean, Anglo-American model, the financial capital, why it's very dangerous? Because the total amount of debts in one country, United States, is the total GDP of the world, 100%. Understand me? Any government, any leader can pay back. Even change me to be the president in US. Can I do something to make change? No way. So I'm very respect to President Obama because he promised we can make change. Change what? Change the structure. QE1, yeah, he make a lot of QE. QE invest into Wall Street, into institutional investments, into this bubble, to enlarge big bubble and then to enlarge the debts. Nobody can pay back. That is why nobody can change the trends. That trend means that you only can enlarge your military power, you can maintain such kind of unstable structure. That is why United States now, even they have a very serious debts, they still have 47% of the world military expense. The biggest in the world, even its big debts. They cannot pay back. But by what? How can they maintain such kind of unstable structure? Military power. So once a time, you just say that some people ask, I mean, and you need to tell us what is the political regime of its financial monetary capital fascism. I said, okay, enlarge military expense and to maintain such kind of unstable structure, that's new liberalism, that is a new imperialism. And now, the second level is industry. Industry now in the United States, how much? Percentage to GDP. Down to 11%. Mainly it's military industry. So 80 to 85% of the GDP is financial sector and so-called third industry. This is financial. So this 85% big, and then very little. So this is a triangle. Is the upside triangle is The industry became smaller and smaller. And then you know how much is agriculture? 2.4%. So that is you can, no matter which party to be the ruling party, can you stable such kind of structure? That is the problem. So why we talking a lot about this, what is a new imperialism, what is new liberalism? That is a different system. Okay, turn back to Samir Amin. He several times mentioned 1955 Bandung Conference in Indonesia, joined by this newly independent third world country. And then he said it's of Asia plus Cuba. That is exactly the first ally of South-South Solidarity. SSS, South-South Solidarity, from 1955, from Bandung Conference. And I remember that Amin is the youngest member to participate in Bandung Conference at that time. Now he became a senior person. And by Bandung Conference, these newly independent countries, it's all somehow big countries, like India, like China, like Indonesia, like Yugoslavia, and so and so. It's somehow bigger than small independent country. They do have some power to set up their alliance. Not exactly close to any, I don't want to say the Soviet Union is imperialism, but Mao side, in 1960s, he said Soviet Union is a social imperialism. So this, we are Chinese, we got to learn from Mao, so Mao side, you know Mao Zedong, you know Chairman Mao, yes. So he criticized. So that's the two allies. One ally is led by United States, another ally led by Soviet Union. So other South countries, if they won't join this two geostrategic group, they need to have another one. So that is the third. So why after this 1950s, in 1960s, Mao in China announced the third world. The third world is not exactly from United States. It's not Anglo-American model. It's also not Moscow model. It's our developing countries. So the South, from the 1950s, started to be the South. To set up their solidarity is the first test, or the first try. They tried to set up this South-South solidarity. So that is why I said, I heard several times Amin talking about 1955, but few people understand why he very much emphasized 1955 Bandung Conference. It's because that is the start of South-South solidarity. So nowadays, when we want to continue the South-South solidarity, we need to learn what that time happened. That is history. The history is very, very important. Okay, let's put that aside. And you want to hear me more, or you just want me to
Go.
I think that I take too much time. I would like to ask you to join this discussion. Okay, let's give you another one. we have so many Egyptian parents. Okay, so it's not only you from Egypt. Samir Amin also originally from Egypt. And I also learned a lot from Egyptian. Not now, also from history. Why we said it's a very dangerous now, the Western style new imperialism or financial fascism is very dangerous. And there will be more severe crisis. Because the financial crisis, one by another, it's a circle, one by another. And then South-South solidarity, what is our aim? Our aim is for the preparation. For our solidarity, prepare to protect ourselves from this global bubble break. That is why we very much emphasize the main enemy, the major danger. It's not that it's like a lot of people think about China is a new imperialism. Why I think that it's he talked a lot about China, and it doesn't mean that he's trying to protect China. No, it's because China is now still be a kind of stabilized economic and the social structure, and it's not exactly the Western style imperialism. Now the new liberalism, what is the new structure here? Here is a currency strategy. Currency strategy means that I said QE1, QE2, and QEN. That is easier. And then one hand you print the paper money, another hand you print the bonds, and then use this money to buy your bonds. Means that enlarge a lot of liquidity. Where is that? Where is flow? It's flow to the petrol market, flow to grain market, raw materials markets. So this QEN means financial power, means large amount of financial capital produced low cost. You don't need to pay cost. I several times talked to my colleagues. I said, okay, 5% is the cost. You can earn 95. Just 5% is the cost. You can earn 95. So any government even change you to be the leader in such kind of new imperialism. You must do it because that one is low cost. And then large amount of this money flow to this oil market and green. So there's a green dollar or green or oil dollar. This one support the currency strategy. Nowadays, we said that more than 60% of the new issue dollar flow into the market, this market. And then immediately to make this petrol price increase. And then the green price increase. Give you an example. Egyptian street conflicts turned to the Egyptian revolution. You said that the revolution outcomes were stolen by some others. Okay, but I'm a researcher. Let me tell you that why you have such kind of revolution. Because from 2007, there is a bad loan happened in New York, in Wall Street. And then 2008 turned to the global financial crisis. And then large amount of this QE flow to the green markets, and then to make the wheat, the price of wheat increased within 1 year, 100% increment. Your country, more than 50% of the wheat powder import. Means that you don't have food sovereignty. More than 50 means that if the wheat price increased 100%, your country need to pay more than 100% to buy this wheat. Okay, so and then the market price your food increased, and then these poor people in the slum. Once a time you led us to go to visit this slum area.
Yeah.
Yeah. These poor people cannot stand because increase 100%, more than 100% of the food means very much harm the poor people. So they go to street. And then caused by the education system. Our Japanese colleague this morning said that the situation in developing countries, especially in these young people's education. They all educated by Western textbooks. And then they prepared for working for Western countries, not for your own country, because you have no industry. And it doesn't mean Japan and China. It's that in Egypt, you have no industry. And then you have Western systems education. And then young people, they educated, when West country reduce their demand, you have no job. So more than 50% of high educated young people lose job, and then they go to street. So these are two major forces. One is hunger people, poor. Another is high educated young people with no job. These are two streams go together to have a street revolution. Then caused by what? By the global crisis, by the financial strategy, by such kind of triangle. That is North Africa. So last time in Dakar, when we join your discussion, I do my analysis, I ask your people, I said, okay, you have now the revolution, and then, so what? After your revolution, can you solve such kind of problem? No, not by only one country, by South solidarity. That is why, finally, let me finish. Because you have to face such kind of challenge. You cannot stop them to print this bubble money. And you cannot stop them to use this bubble money in the market. And you cannot stop the market increase the price. You cannot. The only one way is that we need to do the studies to understand what is the situation we are now facing. And then we can set up our solidarity. That is extremely important. But I have another structure, maybe late, not now. Give time to you.
Thank you, with you. So we have maybe next speaker. I would like to invite Pedro. Yes, Pedro Paez has also been participating in the South Forum on Sustainability, and well, we've been talking about why South and also how. And so maybe you can also say something about the kind of alternative strategies and alternative thinking you can identify.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I'm profoundly grateful with the opportunity to share this opportunity with comrades of such stature as Samir, as Wendy Young, and to reflect with you about the velocity and the ferocity in which the events are deploying themselves, in which the crisis has been unfolding. This is not a financial crisis. This is a crisis of civilization. I insist on this issue because it is very easy to put this in terms of a rhetoric device. But if we assume the full consequences of this type of idea, the responsibility for the progressive forces is humongous. And we have very serious troubles. Not only the common people, I'm talking about the intellectuals, the people, the cadres in the left, the trade unionists, the activists. We had a serious problem understanding what is in our noses every day. And we are in a kind of permanent state of denial about the gravity of this crisis. This is a crisis of civilization because even if we can detect some regularities in terms of cyclical processes of expansion and contraction, the Kondratiev waves, the Kirchin, the Juglar, the different type of the Kuznets, the different type of cycles that are intrinsic part of the movement of capital, we need to understand that there is nothing mechanic in this up and down. These swings are part of a movement that is structurally exponential. And remember that the forum that convened us today is the forum on sustainability. The problem of exponential functions is the question mark about time and sustainability in the long term. Now, different to what happened in other structural crises, like during the 30s, this crisis had catch the human species, 7 billion human beings, with no other way to relate to each other than the metrics of the one-dimensional world of commodities, of money. With the incorporation of China, the previous state socialist countries, and a big part of the third world to the dynamic of the global markets, we have almost doubled the labor force exploited in capitalist terms. But more important than that, almost the whole population in the planet depends upon the dynamic of capitalism. And that is very different from what happened during the 30s, in which in each country you have a differentiated situation with important articulations with the rest of the economy, but with a very discriminated part of the system linked to the dynamic of the global markets. Today, everything is linked to the global markets. Even those producers that are devoted to the internal markets, to the domestic markets, very closely related to the reproduction of the peasant economy, of the family units of production, they are totally subsumed by the dynamic of the international prices. Even if they have no interest in the exports, they still require the prices of reference of their own products in terms of the possibilities of speculation or the substitution of the products or the input for the products. And one of the problems that you have plenty of evidence now is that the remedies of the crisis, I'm going to explain this in a while. The injection that Wayne was mentioning 5 minutes ago, the injection of trillions of dollars in the economy had structurally distorted the functioning of the markets. This is not an alarmist situation. You can see by yourself, even in the textbooks of economics, you have the idea that the demand has a negative slope, so the increase in price reduces the demand, and the increase in price is more attractive for the suppliers that are going to increase their supply. But if those prices in the goods markets became also a financial asset, the logic is restored. So you have instead an increase in price is not going to reduce the demand, because you can use those goods also as an asset price, as a means of treasury. So your demand increases. At the same increase in prices is not going to increase the supply, because you want to hold those assets with the hope of higher prices or as a means of savings. And that is what is happening now in the international markets. The tremendous amount of liquidity injected in without productive outcome in the financial markets had created another type of bubbles. Those are not the same type of bubbles that you have in the crisis in the panic of Holland in the 17th century about the tulips, or the panic in the 30s, the last century. This level of liquidity cannot be absorbed by the productive apparatus. In order to have an idea, and this is we need to talk about a qualitatively different type of bubbles, a qualitatively different type of financial market, a qualitatively different type of financial capital, and a qualitatively different type of fictitious capital. The normal financial markets, the normal financial capital was totally supported by the principle of private property and the double accounting. financial derivatives are totally distorted. Right now you have the same clients, several times, hundreds of times, the same financial claim upon one specific productive asset. The subjacent asset has been sold more than 100 times. It is not the communist, it is not the socialist or the anarchist that has destroyed the private property principle. It is the financial capital. The axis of concern of the majority of the economists, both the mainstream economists, but a big part of the heterodox economists, is the public debt. But those are the normal debts, the normal debt supported by the principle of private property. The problem, the type of debts that could be solved within the framework of the bourgeois law, the bourgeois rights. With the apparition of financial derivatives, you have a juxtaposed system of networks of claims upon the same mechanism. When I was Minister of Economics in Ecuador, we could trace, for example, with just one barrel of Ecuadorian oil was at that time sold 13 times. And we weren't able to be exhaustive in our investigation. The research could go on and on and on. And the same happened. Goldman Sachs went to the Senate in the United States and confessed that in effect, indeed, 1 lingot of gold was sold beyond 100 times. The problem with the mortgages in the United States is due precisely to the fact that there is no possibility to retrieve one unique title of the mortgage because it was structured in in thousands of different financial assets. So, just to have an idea, a quantitative idea of the level of disproportionality between the real world and the virtual world of debts, of this new type of debts, you have the global GDP with an amount between 63 and 69 trillion dollars. The total amount of normal debts, public debts, enterprises debts, and household debts is around $215 trillion. But the total amount of this new type of debts based upon the financial derivatives represent $1,500 trillion. There is no way to solve this problem. There is no way to pay this. The only way to continue with business as usual is through the profundization of the crisis and the profundization of the destruction of the essential principles of the market and the private property. The result of this situation is that now, and for a long time, and with very few conditions of recovery, the evolution of the prices, the most important relative prices in the international markets, including food, including energy, including gold and other precious metals that are at the core of the financial and monetary stability of the whole system, are totally distorted. They are not representing anymore the evolution of the costs of reproduction. They are not representing even the conjunctural fluctuations in terms of scarcity. That situation defines upon the logic of the productive apparatus is very serious sign of not only of uncertainty, but of dynamic incongruence. The problems that Marx reflected upon in the second and the third volume of Capital about disproportionality now acquires colossal dimensions. Which is the price of oil, for example, to set up which are the investments that are viable, are profitable? Which is the long-term price of oil that could render viable the introduction of new type of technologies, renewable technologies in terms of the usual considerations of sustainability. which is the equilibrium price, equilibrium rate of exchange between the euro and the dollar. We have a complete distortion of the matrix, the basic matrix of the functioning, of the signals of the market. The notion of South-South cooperation is not the same notion that we had. We have to retrieve, we have to nourish ourselves from the trajectories and the roots that we have of the fights in the past. But the need of South-South cooperation is much more important than ever, because it's the only hope to recover some level of sensibility, some level of congruence in the reproduction of life on the planet. The solution for this, for the cuspid of the structure of power that is based upon the reproduction, the enlarged reproduction of the speculative apparatus, only have as horizon more war and speculation and destabilization. Because in the solution of other crises, what you have is a destruction, or a massive destruction of capitals. But that massive destruction of capital included productive capital in order to mitigate the overproduction crisis, and a massive destruction of financial capital, a massive destruction of fictitious capital as representation, as private property claims of the representation of the real capital that survived the process of competition. Now, this process of purge of capitalism is not possible within the framework of the legal structure of capital based on the principle of private property. Because the amount of derivatives that, for example, JP Morgan Chase had is $97 trillion, more than 150% the total GDP of the world. There is no way to consolidate in terms of the bankruptcy laws the final structure of power that could become after the netting of the different assets and liabilities in the higher commands of the economy. The linking between this logic, not of the financial capitalism, but this new type of financial capitalism, this speculative monopolistic capitalism, with respect to the logic of monopolic productive capitalism, had also a geographical and geopolitical expression in terms of the dispute between the old core of the system, still with the military power and still with the power and the monopoly of the global liquidity and the global transactionality through the dollar and through the Anglo-American financial network, while the core, the center of gravity of the productive apparatus, even under the form, under the organization of monopoly capital, is in the new semi-peripheries, with a more conspicuous expression in the BRICS. The tension of the short-term projection of these two forces, even if the logic of speculative capital could absorb and could capture important segments of the block of power in China, Brazil, Russia, India, and of course South Africa, even if that happens, the logic, the contradiction between the logic of accumulation and the logic of space congruence and nation-state survival is going to produce a very serious scenario of tensions. The military siege upon of NATO upon Russia, the military strategy of precluding the logistic provision of raw materials and energy for China, the menace that Brazil and the new process of Latin American integration that has provoked the deployment and unfolding for the first time of the 4th Fleet of the United States now or even 3 years ago, when Latin America was for the first time the whole continent without any dictatorship. And then it was the moment in which they choose to deploy the Fourth Fleet without any type of legitimacy. All this stuff is part of a very grave increase in the tensions that is very, very convenient for speculative capital, because wars are a tremendous business. You can lend to all the sides in the conflict to buy your weapons, and then you can sell also the intelligence, and then you can provide the contracts for the reconstruction. It is a round business. It's been a round business everywhere. So we are doomed if we cannot react from the perspective of the South in a very wide coalition, in a very pragmatic coalition, now and here. If we cannot provide an alternative seen from the perspective of peace and development, the agenda of this financial, this speculative oligarchy is going to set up the course of the events as it has done so far. Beneath the surface, everything has been a pedir de boca. How can you say a pedir de boca in English? Everything has been under the script of the very tiny, the most corrupt speculative oligarchy after the implosion of the financial crisis, the financial implosion of the crisis that they themselves provoked. Instead of being weakened by the crisis, those sectors have strengthened in a colossal way their power, and they have entered into a new era of Kafkian, of absurdity in terms of their proposals and in terms of their actions. In such a rapidity, in such a velocity, that it is not possible for them to recover the conditions for legitimacy even within their own nation states. And that is why you have another reason why the possibilities of the South-South cooperation, of the South-South mobilization, the South-South initiatives, not only can have a very pragmatic and realistic effects upon the North, but also the possibility of providing the moral reserves that the humanity requires in order to face with responsibility the gravity of this crisis of civilization.
Maybe you can tell us some of your ideas on alternatives. Maybe you could come and sit here. Thanks.
Try to follow those particular performances, but I can't even write in the chalk. I'm actually reading from this last presentation, because I actually think that what has been posed is a challenge which I don't think we can ignore. The question is, how do we build up such a coalition? Bandung represented not a technical organization. It was something that occurred as this sweep of the wave of liberation movements across the continent. And it forced that dialogue to take place. I'm not sure that yet we are in a situation where there is a similar motivation amongst governments in the South to be prepared to sit down and talk Turkey, as it were, talk in a way in which we have a dialogue to find a pragmatic way of developing South-South cooperation, which, if what you're saying is right, constitutes a major challenge to humanity. I mean, that's what I'm hearing from your talk. I think that I don't think the objective situation internationally yet exists for that to happen. I think what we are seeing, I think the Egyptian revolution, the Tunisian revolution, the uprisings, the protests which are being done to happen across the continent, give us some indication that there is some sort of popular protest. We're not just facing a financial crisis, we're facing a crisis of confidence in the way in which the world is ruled today. I think that's what people are out into the streets. It's been 30 years of dispossessions, of immiseration that has taken place. But I think it's an early stage. I'm not sure that it is of the scale which would force our current regimes to be willing to sit around a table to engage in that conversation. I'm not sure that there is a sufficient understanding of the depth of the crisis, of the profound consequences that the crisis will have. And that is a little depressing. I mean, I think possibly Latin America has a much better understanding of that process. I'm less optimistic about the situation across the African continent. I think that's. I think that the potential for it to happen is there. I would say, but it may take 10 years before it actually brings it, forces our regimes to a table. So I think we face a rather desperate situation, to be honest. I'm really encouraged to hear a dialogue from the left in China, because I think that is another silence that we've had for many years. To what extent the ideas that you described in your various talks today represent a social force within China, I'm not sure. Certainly from what Samir says, you have many forces contending, both on the right and on the left within China, but I don't know enough about the balance of forces within that. But it's not made glibly, because I think that's going to be rather critical. If voices such as yours come out, if there are potentials for making the kind of links that there are with forces that you represent, then I think there is a dialogue to be had. I think it would open up a potential for advancing and building concretely the kind of solidarity that's required. But my suspicion from the little I know about the dynamics of what's happened in the Communist Party recently, I think there are some major tensions that are still to be worked out in China. The capitalist voters, as it were, are strong. I'm not sure about your characterization of you were talking about the private accumulation being still controlled by the state. I know that there are many individuals who now accumulate
27% private sector in the industrial area. 27%.
20%. Take it 10 years ago. How many? What was the proportion?
It's much later.
But that's what I'm talking about. It's the trend that is worrying, not so much the current status.
25% of private financial assets controlled by the private sector. 27 industries controlled by private sector.
And 64% of China's exports are manufactured by international transnational corporations located in
55%.
55%. But still a large majority. So if I buy a Chinese shirt, half of it belongs to a transnational.
70% means that the high volume products that is controlled by transnational.
So these are electronics.
Yeah.
Not the t-shirts.
That is why they rename China as a world engine, world economic engine, because they control its export.
And that brings us back to the questions I was raising this morning about the nature of China's interventions in Africa itself. I think there's, first of all, as far as I know, if one looks at foreign direct investment in Africa, China is still one of the smaller players. When one looks at the order of magnitude, you have UK number 1, US number 2, France number 3, Canada and Germany competing with each other, and then Malaysia, India, and then China.
And how about Japan?
Japan as well, yes, that's within that. Europe. So,
Gulf countries.
yeah, Gulf countries. But China is still a very small proportion of that, and that's because it came late to China. All the oil resources are already taken. Where China has moved in has been opportunistically, where Sudan, where the US couldn't come in Angola, where the World Bank said they couldn't have loans. China did. But the reality is that the operations of China's corporations in Africa are, in essence, no different to the way in which other transnational corporations and I think that has created an environment of strong antipathy, where especially with the mainstream propaganda pushing and saying that China is the main problem, despite it being a very small player.
The big sum, small.
Yeah.
But this is a myopic situation, because just one little point, different to what happens with the old core of the system, for the semi-peripheral countries, they had everything to gain, nothing to lose in changing the situation. For example, in the case of China, if they increase the consumption of every Chinese in just $1, they can compensate the loss of the drop in the market due to the over-indebted north that has been the scheme, the primary scheme up to 2009. And the same happens with Brazil, the same happens with India. If they pretend to replicate the same conditions of coloniality, of sub-imperialism, Brazil, India, South Africa, China, Russia, with the rest of the world, this is unsustainable. Because they can provide for some time, and they can protect for some time the provision of raw materials and energy, but they cannot provide the markets, the solvable markets for acquire the tremendous potential of manufactured production. That is not an issue for England, because England do not have any industry anymore. It's just financial speculation. But it is a big problem for monopolistic productive capital. And I think that is the most important difference, the most important contradiction of the new era. That is the most significant political possibility for stopping the perpetual war and the agenda of overall destabilization in the world.
But can they ever can they ever pretend to copy imperialism? Because there are so many internal contradictions within each of these countries. The class alliance, whether it's India or Brazil.
The project is there. Don't fool ourselves. Huh? We cannot fool ourselves. I came from an organization, the Alternative Summit in Durban right now, with the trade unions and social organizations of the BRICS countries, with this the new scramble of Africa. It's the re-edition of Berlin. That is the fear of the people there. And that is a very justified fear. The problem is that for the same bourgeoisies in each one of these countries, it's totally myopic to pretend that they can replicate the same type of situation in Latin America, in Africa, because nobody is going to buy the manufactured goods. And we are in the middle. That is why it's so important in the reading of the crisis. We are in the middle of a tremendous overproduction crisis. For the case of Brazil, for sure there are a lot of myopic situations, even among the cadres of the PT, people with such a level of talent and with such a trajectory of struggle and all this stuff. But they cannot pretend, under any circumstance, to replicate the same conditions of exploitation, of asymmetry, for example, in the case of Itaipu, in Yacyretá, with respect to energy, or with the problem of external debt with respect to the opposition to Banco del Sur and the expansion of the Brazilian banks financing the development in the rest of Latin America. Or the Chinese Development Bank cannot pretend to replicate that situation, lending in yuans, because it is not possible to repay. It is possible to extract, to exprime, to siphoning out resources for some time. But it is not possible. The level of desperation of this scheme has reached such levels of saturation that now they have to neo-colonialize their own metropolis through the austerity packets and the external debt gain in order to replace the extraction of relative surplus value through tributary mechanisms, archaic mechanisms of exploitation and domination. And that is what is finishing the capitalist world now. The only possibility, and not necessarily under the predominant logic of profits and the predominant logic of the financial capital, the only possibility of relaunching growth in the world is through the expansion of markets, a massive process of income distribution. And we have to dispute which kind of distribution for which kind of growth. Of course, we have to redefine, to deconstruct the whole, even the technological paradigm behind this. But what is clear is that it is impossible for the Chinese bourgeoisie, for the Russian bourgeoisie, for the Brazilian, for the Indian, for the South African bourgeoisie, trying to replicate and to become themselves an empire. It is not possible. It is totally feasible to provide, to set up a military machinery, military financial machinery, in order to extract a surplus and to provide the cheap raw materials and energy. But there is no, even in terms of accounting, if you had sometimes, even in terms of accounting, not a mathematical issue, but an arithmetic issue, in terms of accounting, is unsustainable. The dynamics for the provision of markets for the overproduction of manufactures require another type of international division of labor, another type of economic policies, another type of regimes of accumulation, that it is very, very possible that it is not compatible with the predominance of the law of profit. I'm not saying that the private enterprise is going to collapse. What I'm saying is that the criteria of totality, the principal regulatory axis of the society cannot be anymore a rate of profit of 25-30%, as the speculative capital is claiming right now. And it's imposing in the overall functioning of the economy, in the overall formation of relative prices, such a levels of distortion that this is totally non-viable. And that is, it is not an ideological problem. It is not a wishful thinking. is trying to understand which is the inner dynamic of the most important forces in the game right now.
So I'd like to invite Francois to tell us a bit about that, and also to say what you've been doing with the common good of humanity.
Yes, well, I will be very brief. I just want to be provocative. I wonder if, after what we have heard from Wendy, from Pedro, if the category South-South is still valuable. Because we see that the North is present in the South from that point of view. And that means the logic of the capitalist system and also of the financial capitalism. And so, in this sense, I think that when we speak about South-South solidarity, what do we mean? If we mean the governments, I'm very doubtful that there is a possibility of South-South solidarity. If we mean the local capitalism, they have just the same logic as the one of the North. And so, what do we mean? If we accept a class analysis, then we can speak about solidarity between the lower classes that you spoke about in China and with the other lower classes in other countries. That is a solidarity that I see finally. So we have, I think, to go out of the too abstract concept to try to go to the concrete analysis of the reality and see where is solidarity possible from the point of view of classes. The second aspect is what kind of relationship do we meet in the South with nature, which is a very fundamental challenge for the future of mankind. We see that there is no difference, practically, for the model of development. We speak about industrialization, we speak about the growth of the PIB, of the
GDP.
Yes, etc. We are using the same categories as the type of development we have known in the North. So what is the meaning? What is the meaning of development of productive forces in the South, which would not destroy even more what Karl Marx was calling the equilibrium of metabolism. And so we see that in those two areas, what are we speaking about? The area of the lower social group classes, and the area of relation with nature, and what kind of new alternative, what kind of alternative for development can we find? And there, of course, I think that there we can organize a solidarity. But I think we have to be clear in that.
Francois, could you also say something about the common good of humanity?
Ah, yes, yes.
Yes.
You can distribute them. Yeah, I see that. It's wonderful. Chinese.
Maybe you can say something about this one.
No, that just yes, more about that. It's just a pedagogical instrument to try to see how to come out, how to build alternative to the model, and how to come to common good of humankind as a concept, a post-capitalist concept, and try to see concretely what can that mean. But I will not explain more.
The pamphlet and the DVD, they are complementary. So later on, I will also invite Toshi and Tina, Sandeep, Manto. I don't know whether you want to speak, but then we will hear from them. I think you would want to say.
Yeah, okay. I think
I think the economic analysis helps us to understand the underlying contradictions of capitalism. They have taken new dimension. That's true. I will not elaborate. I fully agree with the analysis made so far. I think we are underestimating the danger we are living in. Because, and this is to elaborate on the point that Peter was making, the danger we are living in now is the unleashing of war by the capitalist, by the countries that dominate our economies, our societies. What we witnessed between 1885 and 1945 were wars between the imperialist countries for colonization and acquiring resources from our countries, mainly, especially Africa. I come from Africa. After 1945, it was Cold War, but it was Cold War for them. For us, it was hot, because they fought proxy war in our territories, Soviet Union and Western countries. I'm now the political side of the argument, economic side, you understand. In that situation, some of our countries were able to disalign, non-align themselves on the Cold War, but not all of them. For example, Pakistan was part of it, and so on. Many countries were part of the West. So that Cold War was a hot war for us. It was a war. It was a third war. What we are witnessing now is a fourth war. World War IV or World War IV. It's happening. Except that we are in denial. We are not fully appreciating that we are in a war situation. I will not elaborate too much on that. The first fundamental consequence of this war is resource war. What's happening in Mali, in other countries, and Central African Republic, in these countries, in fact, is a claim by imperialist countries of the West to strategic minerals, especially uranium, and also petrol and so on, in order to prepare for war. And what's happening is that the United States have basically told the European countries that you now look after the Mediterranean and Iran and Africa with soldiers on the ground, and we are shifting to the Pacific because China is a problem. And that's exactly what's happening in the present dynamics of configuration of global forces. In this struggle for resources, I'm afraid that the climate is no longer an issue. Climate no longer an issue. Because one of the things that's going to be sacrificed is climate. Because environment provides the resources to fight. Comrades, what I'm saying is that in order to understand what's the moment of where are we living at this point in time, if we only talk in abstraction of economics, we will not understand the political side of it. I have two more points to make. One is, how do we handle this crisis? It's not by modeling. There is no model. In fact, if you think of a model, that would be idealistic. In other words, it's the old idealism, Kantian idealism, Hegelian idealism, and so on. No modeling. There are no models in the Arab world now because the struggle is intense at the grassroots level. And we don't know what will come out of that yet because the war is going on. So,
we are also not going to wait until we find a model to fight ourselves. No, we fight every step of the way. I come from Africa, and we have for 20 years fought against the World Trade Organization and the Economic Partnership Agreement, and we are winning. In the Economic Partnership Agreement, we have blocked the European Union from signing an agreement with us. And you know who are fighting this? Our own regimes that are corrupt. So we fight a double battle. My friend colleague has just left, Jane Arunda from Uganda. She could tell you concretely what happens. We fight at two levels. We fight against the empire, we fight against our own governments, because they are corrupted. And we put them in the light of public opinion to say, these guys are signing away birthrights of our people for the appropriation of our resources for our well-being. We don't sign the agreement. And we won battles. And the battle is on, because the European Union just last week said that we must sign the agreement by 2014. The point I'm making is, understand the abstractions. Fully agree. There's a Das Kapital, where he talks about capitals in moving country. There is also the class struggles in France, which uses political struggles. If we are not able to address the political struggles of this moment and get ourselves caught up in economic analysis only, not I'm accusing anybody if you do that. I'm just saying that the politics and the economy are two sides of the same coin. And there I must say that I am concerned about some of the things that are happening in China. I am saying that China has become the manufacturing base of the global world. And the people who are suffering in China are the working people, working classes. They are now paying the price for feeding the rest of the world, for manufacturing products. And that's a struggle that must go on in China too. It's a struggle that must go on in other countries as well. So Robert, I'm talking about a multi-dimensional understanding of the global situation, because abstractions can just mislead us into working out wrong spectrum. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Could you introduce yourself?
My name is Yash Tandon. I'm from Uganda.
Thank you.
You're originally not African.
I'm African. Well, you want me to ethnically identify myself? No.